Welcome to the Commander's Vault. My name is Joe, and today we are going to go over a deck tech of Marwyn the Nurturer. Now guys, this deck is not a CEDH deck, but holy cow is it strong. Hey, if it's your first time here on the channel, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Like I said, my name is Joe. I'm an Army veteran, and I like to take the tactics I learned in the military and try to apply them to Commander. Now, a lot of people ask, how could you possibly do that? Well, I was fortunate enough to get sent to a lot of schools in the military that helped me put together different tactics and understandings of things. So, we're going to see if any of that makes any difference when it comes to Commander. So, when I build a Commander, I try not to look at any of the different decks that are out there. I do ask for help from people that are a little bit smarter than I am, and they help me put them together. So, when we started playing Magic, one of the decks that my wife wanted to build was an elf deck. I wanted dragons, she wanted elves, and so away we went. And this was the second iteration of an elf deck for my wife. We started out with a different one, and it really morphed into this the more we played the other deck. And she decided that she wanted Marwyn to be the commander of the deck, and then asked me to pilot it a few times to see how it would play. So that's what I did, and here are the results. So first up, as the commander, we have Marwyn the Nurturer. She should be, between her and Savala, they are the de facto elf commanders if you're going mono green. In mono green, you really don't have to worry a lot about your mana. That's not going to be an issue in this deck whatsoever. And for Marwyn, anytime another elf enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on her, and then you can tap her to add amount of green mana equal to her power. This goes crazy. So let's get into the deck. We're running one Planeswalker, okay? And the reason we're running this Planeswalker is because immediately +2 ability creates a 1/1 green elf druid token with tap to add a green. Now, that will do two things. One, gives us another mana rock. Two, it gives us another elf, which gives us another counter. As you'll see, everything about this deck is trying to get as many elves on the battlefield as possible and having as many mana rocks to help us power out our game enders. And we do have some game enders here. The other great thing about this is that you can -2 to destroy a target artifact or enchantment, and to have that on a Planeswalker is a great option. But the really cool thing about this is the ultimate. You -6 her to draw a card for each green creature you control. The last time I did this, I ended up drawing 12 cards. When I did the ultimate on this, 12 cards. 12 cards in a green deck where you don't have mana issues. That won me the game. Armorcraft Judge, again, this one, when he enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. And you'll see there's ways to give 1/1 counters to a lot of stuff in this deck. This one also draws a lot of cards. Beast Whisper, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. This is, if you are running mono green, you should have this in there. Circle of Dreams Druid, this one, add a green for each creature you control. Again, no mana issues whatsoever with this card. Delighted Halfling, one of the very few non-elves in this entire deck. And the reason we're running this, because when you go to cast Marwyn, everybody knows that Marwyn will be the problem. So being able to have it uncounterable is absolutely necessary in this deck. Now, she may get removed once she hits the field. We've got some ways to try to prevent that, but being able to tap and prevent that counter with Delighted Halfling makes a huge difference. Elvish Archdruid, this one is just another one. You can buff your elves. The problem with elves is sometimes they're just little mana dorks and they're 1/1s. This makes all of those a little bit bigger, and it allows you to tap for even more mana. Like I said, we want to get as many elves out as we can. This will tap for mana for each of those elves. Elvish Mystic, just a classic mana rock. Elvish Visionary, just another way to draw cards in the early game. Elvish Warmaster. This one is great with any of those things that help us create elves. So how this one works is I like to play this one on turn 2 if I can. Marwyn turn 2 or 3. If I can get this guy out on turn 1 or 2, I like to. If I can get Marwyn out on turn 2 or turn 3, great. And then this guy's down first. Marwyn comes down. He automatically creates an elf. That automatically buffs Marwyn, and you get another elf. The next turn, another elf comes in, and this just starts the snowball effect. Uzuri, another great one to have in your deck. Some people put him as the commander, which I understand because you can bring elves back. But what I really like about this is that it's a finisher. You get to buff everybody up, get them big enough, and they can crash through with the trample damage. Another mana rock. This is great because it taps for double green. Another mana dork. This one, just another mana dork that could also give you card advantage. This one lets you turn your non-mana dork elves into mana dorks. This one's great. So this one is part of an infinite combo in this deck to win. So there are several ways to go infinite with mana in this deck, but with this card, this will allow you not only to go infinite mana, but also make infinite 1/1 green elf tokens, which then will make Marwyn infinitely bigger on top of it. And then it doesn't matter how many blockers they have. When you send 500 elves at everybody, you're going to end up winning the game. So I will talk about this in a little bit with some of the different artifacts that we have. We've got 2 artifacts in here that allow us to untap with certain amounts of mana. And you just so you tap Marwyn and untap Marwyn to get all of the mana that you need. Then you move the equipment over to the Imperious Perfect, and then you tap and untap with that green mana to create infinite green elves. This thing is nuts. I had this in play, Marwyn in play, and I had the artifact in hand, and someone behind me went, oh, he wins on the next turn, and the entire board swung at me, so I couldn't win. Kami of Whispered Hopes. This is a mana dork that gets bigger and can make Marwyn get bigger faster. Another way to buff your elves, and it gives you more card draw. Like, one of the most important things in Commander is being able to get card draw, and this is just another way to do it. Llanowar Elves, classic mana dork. This one, just another mana dork, but also in a pinch, allows you to get a 3/3 with haste. Sometimes you just need another creature on the field, and this can do that. This is just another one to get additional lands in play. We're not running a whole bunch of lands, but in the early game, if you're land heavy in your hand and you've got this one, you can start dumping lands onto the field. We do have a Nissa in here, so with her, sometimes it's really great to double down on the lands. Llanowar Tribe, just a great mana dork. And here's that Nissa that I was talking about. So for landfall, this is great if you have that other one that allows you to put the additional land in play, because you'll be able to do that every turn if you have enough lands in your hand, and especially in the early game, that's really easy to do. So what you do is you play your additional land, add an additional green mana, tap that other elf to play an additional land on your turn, create another green mana, and then cascade into another elf that immediately goes to your hand, that then you have enough mana to cast. So that is why Nissa is in here. New one from Lost Caverns. So when you're running a bunch of little elves, they have a hard time getting through. But you drop a 6/5 that is really hard to kill, changes things. I really like this. Out of all of the gods that they put in Lost Caverns, I think this one is one of the coolest because of what it does. It's got trample, and you're going to find someone, especially because if you have this in hand, with this type of deck, it is not hard to get this thing down on turn 3 or turn 4. That's how much mana you're making in this deck. So if you get this down on turn 4, you will be able to get a 6/5 on someone. Someone's going to get some damage. This allows you then to reveal cards from the top of your library until you find a creature and or land and put them onto the battlefield. So whatever amount of damage you do, you get to flip over, take a land and a creature from those ones you flipped. They go on the battlefield. The rest go back into your library. And that is just huge. So in one swing, by turn 4 or 5, you get an additional land, which will trigger Nissa. Then you also get an additional creature onto the battlefield, which most likely is an elf, which will trigger Marwyn. This is absolutely bonkers. And if it dies, it just turns into another land that all you have to do is control 10 permanents and you can flip it back over. And it only costs 3 mana if you control 10 permanents and you flip it back over into this. In this deck, it is not hard to get 10 permanents. This card is absolutely bonkers in this deck. Priest of Titania. This, if you're running an elf deck, you absolutely should have this card. Just a classic mana dork. Reclamation Sage. Again, this is great utility because you get to destroy targets' artifacts or enchantments, which that is huge to be able to do that. Here's one of the ways to untap. Especially if you don't have the artifacts yet, you can get a ridiculous amount of mana out of Marwyn with this. So, tap her to get all the mana you need, untap her, tap her again to get all the mana you need. This is this is absolutely nuts. All right, this is one that I just added in, and I added this in because I was playing on Arena with this same deck, and I was having a hard time actually finishing out games. And then I realized it is very easy to get 9 or 10 mana in this deck very quickly. It is not very hard at all. And if you hard cast this, it has haste and ward 10. Okay. And when it attacks, it's already going to fight and kill something at a 10/10 level and still get through for damage, most likely. Once I cast this in the last game, everyone conceded because once he came down, they all had like onesies and twosies of things that maybe were like a 3 or 4 power, but nobody could put together 10 total damage to block something. And this won the game. Being able to drop this bad boy down won the game. Now, we've got a couple big hitters that do this type of stuff, and it wasn't just him. I also had another card you're going to see, so his damage was actually 20/20 every swing. So he was a 20/20 every swing. Absolutely bonkers. All right. This just Death Touch to stop against all those little flyers that want to come at you. So in the last game, someone actually had an old Gnawbone down and would not swing at me just because I had this on the field. This was the only thing stopping that thing from swinging at me. Tireless Provisioner. This one's kind of sneaky because every time you play a land, you get a treasure token or a food token. I've used this for the treasures, and this is really good when they start spot removing a lot of the mana dorks, or there's a creature-based board ripe. Being able to have those treasures as backups lets me just power stuff back out again. Varus Silvermoon Ranger. This one has ward and reach. And he does the dungeon thing, which I wasn't quite sure how I would feel about the dungeon thing in a game of Commander, but because you're playing so many creatures and you can do this every turn, if you get him out in the early game, it's going to allow you to get the wolf token out, but it's also going to allow you to get the benefits of the dungeons which some of them ping people for damage, some give you treasures, some let you scry. There's a bunch of different things you can do with the dungeon mechanic in this deck that just adds a little bit more fun to the game. Well-Wisher, this one, I actually used this one and my life total shot through the roof, which kind of surprised everybody. They thought I was down to like 15 life and were trying to figure out how to kill me on the next turn. I tapped this and went up to 40-something life. It was ridiculous. Again, this is just another mana dork. This is a newer addition to the deck. This is closer to the end of the game. This just really, it ends games. Because you start creating 1/1 green elf warrior tokens at every upkeep. So at every upkeep, Marwyn's getting triggered. And whenever another elf enters the battlefield to include that 1/1, you gain life equal to its toughness. So elf comes in, you gain life, and you get a counter on Marwyn, which makes it so you can cast additional things. This is just nuts. As soon as we saw this card, it immediately went in the deck. This one is great if you are looking for lands. This is just a really simple one. Or if you're in the situation with Nissa and you have an opportunity to take advantage of that, this is just another way to do it. This is one of the ones you want to try to get. Being able to cast on other people's turns so that you don't have summoning sickness. It's almost a way to get haste on your stuff if you've got the mana to do it. So how I've used this one is it's been on the field. I've actually held up I've played some things, but held up mana, especially on the mana dorks. And then as it's coming around on the other person's end step, I'll tap my mana dorks, cast as many things as I can, untap, draw, and you just really abuse that mechanic. Being able to give anything flash is always a good thing. And then Zapandra Hunger Dominus. This thing is a freaking rock star in this deck. I've had this down several times when I've played it, and this doubles your power and toughness of every single creature, every combat until end of turn. This will stop people swinging at you and give you the power to actually finish out games. When I said that 10/10 Dinosaur was a 20/20 every turn, that's what it was. Having a 20/20 with Ward 10 makes it very difficult to do anything with, which won the game. You will notice there is no Craterhoof Behemoth in here. We own one Craterhoof Behemoth, and it is not in this deck. Because of the other three big creatures we have, we just haven't seen a need to put it in here. That would probably just be a little bit overkill. Super easy to finish games. But these just make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit tougher puzzle to figure out. All right. This one, you just get to create, you basically double all your elves. 4 mana in an elf ball deck with green mana, super easy to do. And then you just double everything. Last March of the Ants, if you're doing a creature-based deck, you should probably have one of these in it. Lands. Pick your poison. As I said, this is one that's been going in all of our green decks lately. It's just too good not to. Archdruid's Charm. We actually pulled this out of one of the pre-release packs. And this is a great utility for green, especially in a high-power commander deck. It's not CEDH. It's definitely not casual. But to have this in there, you either get to put the 1/1s on Marwyn, which we care about. You can find one of the creatures that you're looking for, which you'll have the mana to cast anyways. You can put a land directly into the battlefield if you absolutely need to. Or you can exile a target artifact or enchantment. The cool thing about this is if someone's got a One Ring, you can exile that. You don't, because it's not destroy. It's indestructible, so you can't destroy it, but you can absolutely exile it. This is a really, really good utility for green, and I'm very happy to have this in the deck. Beast Within, classic green removal. This is a good way if I've got a lot of good utility stuff in the graveyard, put it back into the library. This is just a way to prevent damage. Court of Calling, again, just searching out some of those bigger creatures to help us win games. Elven Ambush, another way to create additional elves, just double the number of elves that we've got. Fertiliz Favor, this is just a way to get more lands and put counters on Marwyn. So as you're seeing, we just want to get as many counters on Marwyn as possible. Fog of War, this one, especially in the token decks that are swinging just constantly with the 1/1s and the 2/2s, you can cast Fog of War. You get life for every creature on the battlefield, and you get to prevent all of that combat damage. So you can block them or you just not even worry about it. Gaia's Gift. This is a way to protect Marwyn and give her counters. Heroic Intervention, protect Marwyn. Lull, again, prevent all combat damage. Return to Nature, removal. Snakeskin Veil, this one is just sneaky good. You get a counter and you get hexproof. Summoner's Pact. This one, be careful when you cast it because it has the lose the game mechanic at the end. You're not going to cast this if you don't have the mana to pay in the next turn. Tamiyo Safekeeping, just another way to protect Marwyn. Tyvar Stand, again, another way to protect Marwyn. You guys are seeing there's a lot of hexproof in here. Then we're going to get to the artifacts, and there's only 3 artifacts in this deck. First one, Blackblade Reforged. You get a 1/1 for each land you control, and it only costs 3 to equip to a legendary creature. So you're looking at a 5 mana turnaround for this, but we put this on Marwyn, okay? Then Marwyn's getting all of the counters from the lands on top of all of the counters from the elves. It doesn't matter how many 1/1 counters she has. It matters what her power is. So this gets nuts. At one point, she was a 31/31 during combat with that Zapandrel. I think she could tap for 15 or 16 mana by herself. That's how crazy this was. And then the next 2, Staff of Domination and Sword of Parns, both of these do the same thing, okay? You untap. This is the 2 artifacts. So this one you equip to a creature. This one is by itself. And with the infinite mana, you untap. So you tap this to untap the creature. Pay 1 to untap the Staff of Domination. Pay 3 to untap creature. Pay 1 to untap Staff of Domination. Rinse and repeat. Very easy to do. Sword of the Parns. Okay, again, pay 3 to tap or untap the creature that it's equipped to. This is a 7 mana turnaround to equip. Green deck, not that hard. Once this is on, you tap Marwyn, create the mana, use 3 of that mana to untap, tap Marwyn for the mana, pay 3 to untap, rinse and repeat so you have all the mana you need. Then you put it on that Imperious Perfect, and you do the same thing to create the elves. All right, Elven Chorus. This one is just nutty. Being able to cast creatures from the top of your library, especially in a green deck, and all of your creatures tap for mana now, this thing is a house. If you've got Flash, and you can look at creatures from the top and cast off the top of your library, and everything taps for mana, this is just a fun card. This one, put on Marwyn. She gets a 1/1 on every upkeep. of yours. Every one of your upkeeps, she gets a 1/1. Guardian Project, if you're running green, you need to have this. This just more card draw. Leyline of Abundance. The reason this is in here, it's great that you can tap a land and get an additional green mana off of it, but it's really that 6 and 2 green to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So when you look at the cards that we have that allow you to draw a card for every creature with a 1/1 counter on it, and to draw a card for each green creature you control, it's very important to understand the distinction between the two, because you can play the one that gives you a card for every creature you control. You can pay the 8, cast this one to then draw cards for everything with a 1/1, and everything's going to have a 1/1 counter when you cast it, so you'll be able to draw a ridiculous amount of cards. I used this one, and it was absolutely amazing. I almost decked myself. I was very, very close to that. Season of Growth. This allows you to scry. This works really great when you're trying to cast creatures off the top. Tribute to the World Tree. This is great. This is absolutely a great card. Most of your stuff is going to come in with 1/1 counters on it. And then if you cast any of your big stuff, you're going to end up drawing a card. Unnatural Growth. This is just the enchantment version of the Zapandrel. Utopia Sprawl. This just gives you additional mana. Wilderness Reclamation. When you do have the ability of having things that flash, untapping your lands on every end step, or at the end of your end step, is great, because you can just hold up your mana to do it again. And then we get into our lands. We're not running a whole bunch of utility lands. We're adding this one because it allows you to put 2 1/1 counters on a non-human creature that entered the battlefield this turn. Marwyn's going to get bounced. It's going to happen. She's going to get removed. And so this allows you that when she comes in, you can pay an additional 2 and start her off with 2 1/1 counters, which makes this a lot better. Then we have running our forests, Path of Ancestry, so we can scry anytime we cast, and then the Shire. So this is our Marwyn the Nurturer deck. As I said, this is not a CEDH deck. This is a high power deck. You do need to warn people, if you're going to sit down and play, that this is an elf ball. You do have ways to go infinite, but if someone just keeps bouncing Marwyn, it'll be a much fairer game. So we have played this several times, and this has been a house every single time we've played it. So the first time I played it, it was a high power game, and everyone knew that you could not leave Marwyn on the field. And it still didn't matter how many times I was going off. People would remove things, and I'd still keep going. People would remove things, I still kept going. Now I was playing against 3 other high power decks, and what it ended up coming down to is someone ended up doing a Cyclonic Rift and swinging through and killing me first. With just killing me instead of worrying about the creatures. And that was the only way they could have beat me, was doing that, because on the next turn I had enough to really build up a crazy board state and start swinging. And it was the right call to do the Cyclonic Rift, because they were able to kill me, and then they were able to kill the rest of the board. If you can't use a Cyclonic Rift to kill everyone, don't play it. The next time we played this deck, was really building up a big board state. The person directly after me was playing a mono blue deck with a ton of interaction. Then there was a token deck, and then directly across from me was my wife playing her Animar deck, and it was a pretty high power game. So I'm coming in, and I had turn 1 Mana Dork, turn 2 Marwyn, turn 3 Elvish Warmaster, and another Mana Dork. So I was already starting to get, by turn 2, I think I had 5 or 6 elves on the board, while most people had a tap land or a land, and that was it. So I immediately became the target. And so the blue player next to me was spending all of their interaction to try to remove me. Then the token player was trying to get as much value out as possible. My wife was trying to build up her state. The thing with her Animar deck is it's a mid-range deck. It is not a quick early deck, so she actually needs a couple turns to get going. So I started chipping away damage to everybody that I could. And then we went about that way. The blue player kept bouncing some of my stuff. Anytime someone got interaction, they used it on me. And that just kept happening throughout the game. And then I built up a board state they couldn't deal with, drained them of all of their interactions. No one had trample, so I had more than enough elves to chump block stuff. And then I drew the sword of prunes in there, and I'm ready on the next play to play it. And someone behind me was like, "Oh, you're winning if you untap." And everyone looked and was like, "What?" And then they saw I had Marwyn and I had the Imperious Perfect. I already had, like, I think I had 10 counters on Marwyn already, which was more than enough to do the sword. And so when everyone noticed that, it was full send, full send. So my wife did a full send, and then the token deck did a ram through and took me down to just enough life to kill me, which was an absolute right call because I was about to win the game. The next time I played this deck, again, it was against a token deck, and then I think it was against my wife's Phylanth plant deck. So it was it was a landfall token deck, a token deck, and then the elf ball. And it was just a 3-person pod this time. And again, I got out to a very, very quick start. I was able to get several elves out and really tap them for value. Then I top decked as a Zapandrel, had more than enough to drop that, which then gave me all the protection I needed to just go off. And I did, and it was crazy. We had people stopping and looking at the board state. My board state got absolutely out of hand. Unfortunately, the other two people just couldn't draw their interaction, couldn't draw their board wipes before I was able to get the most value out of the deck. I had Zapandrel out. Then I got all 3 of my big creatures came out. When those came out, that was game. And after the dino hit the board, everyone was like, "Nope, we're done. We will scoop to that. There's no way we can recover." And it was the right call. So, guys, this deck has been a lot of fun to pilot and play. Mono green is so fast on building mana up, and if you build it correctly to have enough interaction, when we look at this deck, we are running 36 creatures. 37 with Marwyn, 38 if you include the Planeswalker, 4 sorceries, and then we're running 15 instants that almost all of them are to protect Marwyn. That's what we're looking to do. So this deck is about getting as many cards as possible to get your finishers down. We want to get the Tarsk down, Zapandrel Hungress, and the Ogier down. You get these down, you're going to be just fine. And if you can set it up right, we get our Imperious Perfect with Marwyn. You start doing the shenanigans of tapping, untapping, you're going to win the game. So, guys, I hope you like this deck tech. We have many, many more deck techs coming. This one has been a lot of fun to play. This is one that we do take with us to our LGS, but we really have to ask people if they're ready to deal with it. And if they're not ready to deal with it, we don't play it. It's one of those types of decks. So, guys, like, comment, leave a comment down below. How do you like to play your mono green decks? Do you like mono green? Do you not? Do you think this is something that's viable for even higher power? Let me know. Always willing to have a conversation. We hope you guys enjoy. Until next time, go to your LGS, support them, find a group, shuffle up, play, and have a lot of fun.